Dude, this stuff's crazy.
I know, right?
I straight up felt like I had spiders all over me last night. It's kinda scary, not gonna lie.
You think that's bad? Wait until you get to the higher doses.
Nah, man, I think I'm good. Bugs crawling all over me is not my definition of a good time.
Oh, come on. I swear it gets better.
No, dude. I like this stuff way better as just cold medicine.
Suit yourself. I'm upping to 400 milligrams tonight.
Good luck with that. Better hope you don't see the Hatman.
He comes when you're at your most vulnerable. You can only see him when the line between the waking world and the unconscious is blurred. But is he here to harm? What is his purpose? No one really knows. All anyone has ever seen him do is stand there and stare. There are several different types of entities and apparitions many people claim to have come face to face with. One such type of these specters are shadow people, featureless beings inhabiting the vague shape of a human. Those in the paranormal community often believe these spirits to be demons, dangerous and evil forces with the sole purpose of bringing dread, pain, and misery. But there's one particular shadow being that stands out from the rest, one that haunts the memories and nightmares of those who've seen him. His namesake comes from his most defining feature. He's known as the Hatman.
My experience with the Hatman came in 1994, when I was about 14 years old. I was living with my grandmother and my great-grandmother at the time at my home in Nashville, Tennessee. I had been staying up really late that night, and at about 2 a.m. in the morning, I found myself lying in bed and nodding off as I was watching TV. The lights were all off, and the only light that was lighting up my room was coming from the TV set in front of me. As I was lying there with the covers pulled up to my face, nodding off, my eyes would open and fall, over and over again. And then at some point, something I heard on TV made a noise and caused me to wake up and open my eyes a little wider. Only this time, I saw something. I had always had a fear about intruders and what I would do if someone ever broke into our home. For a moment, I thought that the movement I was seeing might be my grandmother getting up to go to the bathroom, but as I moved my eyes more into focus, looking down through my great-grandmother's room into the hallway, I very quickly realized that it wasn't my grandmother. I saw a tall, human-like figure, and the figure looked like that of a man. The man had no distinguishable features whatsoever. I could see no eyes, no nose or mouth, only blackness. He looked like a shadow, only darker, much darker. He had a very wide-brimmed hat and a long trench coat that flowed as he moved.
What you just heard is one of the earliest documented encounters with the Hatman. recounted by Timothy M. Brown, the owner of the Hatman Project website, and a man who has made it his life's work to spread awareness of the entity and unlock its secrets. Brown's story also sets the blueprint for what almost every victim of the Hatman sees when they cross paths with him.
He was tall. He was all black with no face, but I could feel his presence, his stare. I saw the dude, 6'2", black trench coat, that goddamn black fedora.
I was at my grandma's house, asleep. I heard a door down the hall open.
It was
Out
pure
of the
silhouette.
hall, a dark
with no
shadow
eyes.
floated into the
It stood
hallway
out against
facing
dark,
me.
like it was made of
He
something
was
darker
tall,
than darkness.
with a short top hat,
twin.
It wore
fedora
coattails
type
When we
thing.
were kids,
and a top
my
hat.
brother and
Other
I would often
discernible
have the same
features.
dream.
He was tall.
When I
Both
was
woke
young,
He was all
up at
black,
twin.
with no face.
Same
Same
When
time.
we were kids,
But I
lived
could
in
feel
this
his
house
presence.
where
often
I
had
would
the
see the
same
Shadow
dream.
Man, and I'll never forget exactly
I
how
saw
he
this
looked. I could never see
giant
Giant
man.
man.
A wide
brimmed
brimmed
hat
and
his
his
trench
trench
coat.
A featureless shadow in the form of a person wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a long flowing trench coat or cape. Many also reported feeling an intense level of dread, anxiety, and even a difficulty breathing when in the Hatman's presence. Even so, most accounts of the being depict him doing little more than just standing and watching. Perhaps one of the more frightening characteristics of the entity is the condition most people are in when they receive a visit from him. Sightings most commonly occur when the human consciousness is in flux, and the line between certain and uncertain is at its thinnest. A large portion of visits from the Hatman seem to happen in the very early hours of the morning. Witnesses just before the event claim to be teetering from awake to sleep, just barely clinging on to reality and fighting off the dream world. When it happens, they're gripped by an overwhelming feeling that something is very wrong. Then suddenly, they find themselves unable to move or speak. Their vision and eye movement is the last remaining method of interacting with the space around them. Anxiety and fear grips their mind, as the state of panic forces them to frantically search for an explanation, a source of their sudden incarceration, until they see him, a mass of dark and glooming energy, the Hatman. However, being in a state between awake and asleep is not the only time the Hatman comes for his victims. As stated before, the entity seems to favor visiting those whose minds are in an intermediary state. However, exhaustion is not the only thing that can place someone in this headspace. Several sightings of the Hatman come from those experiencing the effects of mind-altering drugs and medication. Drugs such as SSRIs, most commonly prescribed to combat anxiety and depression disorders, and even a large intake of caffeine can reportedly cause the mind to enter a state perfect for a visit from the spirit. But the most infamous of these, said to induce a sighting, is diphenhydramine, an over-the-counter medication meant to treat cold and allergy symptoms. Of course, this drug is more widely known by its brand name, under which it's most frequently sold, Benadryl. When taken in high doses, Benadryl begins to act as a deliriant, a type of hallucinogenic that differs from other types of drugs that can induce hallucinations. A deliriant puts the user in a state of confusion and causes visions they have little to no control over. Benadryl has become so popular for this use case that there is an entire subreddit dedicated to its users sharing their experiences while under the influence of this medication. And when looking through these accounts, the Hatman is a common hallucination amongst those who misuse the drug. However, this also seems to be a place in which the Hatman becomes more of a joke than a terrifying urban legend.
Is it possible to sex the Hatman?
Does anyone owe the Hatman money?
I want Rule 34 of the Hatman. Please.
Guys, you can speedrun your meeting with the Hatman now.
I'm the Hatman! Stop summoning me!
But all this still leaves us with one very important question. Who or what is the Hatman? Throughout this video, you've heard me refer to the Hatman as a shadow person or shadow being. This is what most people seem to think he is, given the similarities to shadow people. But this still leaves a lot of unknowns surrounding the entity. We still don't know why he seems to be the only shadow person with the distinguishing features of a hat and long coat or cloak. Why he only seems to visit those in a compromised state, what exactly his purpose is, or why so many people across the world have seen him. How long has the Hatman been around? Many people think that the Hatman is a relatively new phenomenon, an internet urban legend. However, Brown's account was back in the 90s, before the internet was widespread, and was not the only victim of his time either. On top of that, some can even find historical records of Hatman-like beings in ancient societies. Some believe he's here to harm. Some believe he's a gentle spirit. Some believe that the Hatman and shadow people in general aren't spirits or demons at all. They believe them to be extraterrestrial creatures, or even interdimensional beings crossing over to our reality on occasion. Above all, given all this information, let me ask you, the viewer, a simple question. Do you fear the Hatman? Or actually, I think a more appropriate question to ask is, should you fear the Hatman? The answer to this question is actually simple. It's a resounding no. Now, normally this is the part of the video where I tell you the subject of tonight's discussion is complete nonsense and go into the reasons why. However, the Hatman is real, at least in a sense. He's real to the effect that people have actually seen him, but then again, the majority of the internet still can't agree on what color this dress is. Just because people do see the Hatman doesn't mean that he's a tangible thing that needs to be feared. But if he doesn't exist as an actual entity, then what's going on here? The answer can be attributed to a different phenomena. You see, studies show that about 7.6% of individuals on this planet will, at some point in their life, experience something called sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is a condition in which the body gets stuck between an awoken and an asleep state, trapping the victim in the middle of transitioning between the two. This causes your mind to awaken and become lucid, but your body is still asleep. This break in synchronization can be terrifying for those who experience it, due to one little detail about what the human body does while it's asleep. When entering a deep sleep, the body actually paralyzes itself, a way to ensure that you don't move around and end up hurting yourself or others while dreaming. Sleep paralysis is a state in between deep sleep and awakenedness. Not quite awake, not quite asleep. When encountering it, your mind wakes, but your body stays in that paralyzed state, essentially leading you to being conscious and aware of your surroundings, including the fact that you can't move. Your conscious mind is trapped inside your own body. All you're able to do is move your eyes. This sends the mind into a panic, And although your eyes are open and you can still think and take in your situation, the mind is also still half asleep. The panic sends your imagination into overdrive as the brain searches for an explanation for what's happening. It can't find any obvious reason, so it invents one, and in your half-asleep state, this manufactured cause of your condition is able to manifest itself to you in the form of a hallucination. And it has been said that there is nothing scarier to any of us than what our own minds can torture us with. However, this only explains how the mind would be able to create this entity. It still doesn't explain why so many people have seen the same thing across so many different cultures. Well, actually, they don't. Remember Brown's description of the Hatman at the beginning of this video? No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Yet, look up the Hatman in Google Images right now. Pretty much every depiction of him has glowing eyes. So do some of the counters I've shown in this video. And take a look at this mini documentary done by Quartz.
All around the world, people are experiencing the same terrifying vision in their sleep.
戴着类似蓑衣那样黑色尖子帽子，但是看不见脸。
There was 3 of them for me, and the one in the middle was always the guy in the middle. He had a hat on.
У них лидер мужчина в шляпе цилиндре.
Many report what is obviously the same figure, but with small differences, like type of hat and just how many shadow beings appear at once. If everyone is seeing the exact same thing, wouldn't details like whether or not the entity has eyes be the same across the board? Also, throughout this video, I've explained that the Hatman is an oppressive force that causes fear and anxiety to all those he visits. But that's not 100% accurate. He definitely feels like that to some who see him, but not all. There are those out there who view the Hatman as a friendly being, like the explanation of the Hatman given by TikTok creator Witchfoot Incorporated.
That's the Hatman. He's not dangerous. He may be around when you have sleep paralysis or the shadow people come, but he is not one of them, and he does not harm you. Stop terrifying the children on this app and young folk on this app. Thank you.
This, I believe, is more evidence that the Hatman is little more than a trick of the mind. Studies show that sleep paralysis can be more or less intense depending on how the person experiencing it views the phenomena. In Egypt, sleep paralysis has historically been tied to jinn, supernatural beings that bring terror and even death to those who they visit. Because of this, more than 50% of Egyptians still believe that sleep paralysis can cause death, and those who share this viewpoint typically have longer and more intense sleep paralysis sessions. However, in Denmark, sleep paralysis has never been thought of as more than a simple psychological issue, typically brought on by stress. Therefore, their cases of the condition are far less frequent, less intense, and sessions are much shorter in length. Put simply, the more afraid you are of sleep paralysis, the worse it'll be for you, which can definitely explain people's variances on how they feel when the Hatman is around. But this is pretty semantical. Yes, people describe the Hatman's appearance slightly differently. Yes, some people describe him as evil, while others describe him as kind. But this still doesn't explain why so many people see what is obviously the same entity. Regardless of his effect, and regardless of whether his hat is pointy or if he has eyes, several people still report seeing the same thing. A dark, featureless man with a long cloak and a wide-brimmed hat. What's the explanation there? Well, I think the only way to explain this, other than the Hatman being some kind of supernatural spirit, is that there must have been something multiple people saw before falling witness to the Hatman that their mind then skewed to create the legend. There must be some kind of dark man in a hat that it was widespread enough for most people to come into contact with, and in the state of fear and anxiousness that accompanies sleep paralysis, their minds twisted to create the Hatman. But what? Let's look back at some of the earliest sightings of the Hatman. Now, we don't know what the earliest sighting of him was. I brought up earlier in this video that the Hatman has been a figure seen all throughout history. However, upon looking into this claim further, that's not exactly the case. There have been accounts of similar beings that visit people at night and who would hold these people down, aka sleep paralysis, and suck their life away. But coming to people in between a state of awake and asleep is where these similarities end. Not a single one of these entities bears a resemblance to the Hatman. No. Descriptions of the man of the hour seem to stem from the 90s, around the same time Brown had his sighting. So, what image of a man in a hat was distributed widely enough for most people to see in the 90s or earlier? I've seen some sources say that the Hatman could be a member of the real-life Men in Black, a supposed government department said to be largely involved with the investigation of UFOs and alien encounters. They do share similarities, tall, dark, and mysterious figures wearing hats. However, the Men in Black's actual existence is yet to be confirmed, and this explanation dips a little too far into conspiracy theory for my taste. No, I have another theory. The original Nightmare on Elm Street came out in 1984. Freddy Krueger is a dream demon who visits people while they sleep, hunts them down in their subconscious, kills them, and two of his defining features are his striped shirt and fedora. What you're seeing now is the original trailer of the film. In it we can see two instances of Freddy looking a lot like our mystery Shadow Man, here and here. Nobody would have even had to see the film to see a figure very similar to the Hatman, a dark male figure wearing a hat. But okay, I can see this being a bit of a stretch. After all, Freddy is missing one major component to the entity's outfit, a long flowing trench coat or cloak. Well, cinema's favorite dream demon still has that covered. Do you know what installment of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise came out in 1994? A bit into the 90s, but still early enough to influence the minds of many. Wes Craven's New Nightmare. In this film, Freddy sports a new look, new face prosthetics, a wider brimmed hat, and a trench coat. This, along with the other movies that came out before it, is what I believe to be the origin of our Hatman. Then, over time, people began to share their stories of their encounters with him. People would hear those stories, pass them along, spreading them across the world and the internet, which was becoming more and more adopted from the 90s onward. Eventually, someone would hear about the Hatman, his description, and the fact that he visits you in your sleep. And now, a new entity is created, and it can be seen without ever having to watch any of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. We collectively, as a society, created a real-life boogeyman out of the vague image of a fictional one. However, given that as the case, the Hatman is nothing more than a figment of our imaginations. But I don't want to discount anyone's experience with sleep paralysis. It's a real phenomenon, and coming from someone who's experienced it themselves can be incredibly frightening. At the same time, I think this is one fear we no longer have to worry about. The Hatman is nothing more than an apparition of the mind. He cannot be here to hurt anyone, because he isn't real. Despite how serious it can feel when you encounter him. I've personally never seen him, but Let me know if you have, what you thought of the video, and any other topics you'd like me to cover in the future down in the comments below. Thank you for watching.